And we're on. Hello. No, you did it. You nearly did it again. This is my channel. I say hello first, and then you do it. Hello, everyone. I'm here to introduce my guests, Artie, Morty, and GNC Centric. Hello, how are you guys?
Good.
Great. Yeah.
Right. I've already made you timid. So no, which is exactly what I wanted, because I always want to speak the most. You've just had a lovely Pride weekend, is that right? Is it like still fun despite all the kind of tensions and all that sort of stuff? Is it still?
It feels like it's more grassroots now because there's no formal event programming. There's no banks and corporate floats. It's just people deciding that they want to celebrate this weekend. So it feels way better, and it's less crowded.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Like there was a Dyke March yesterday in Toronto, that I attended, and it literally was like a couple of like one lesbian who's been around for a long time, and a couple of friends of hers who are marshals, and they were like, let's do this, and they just made it happen, and everybody showed up.
Totally impromptu it looked like, and it had a big crowd, and like I was saying on Twitter last night, I saw one of these big placards and it said, "Remember Stormé." And if you remember, Stormé de Larverie, I may not be pronouncing that right, was the lesbian drag king who sparked the riot at Stonewall, trans activists are trying to appropriate her as a trans man, I believe. So
she was a drag king.
Yeah, she was a drag king. And I think it's just so wonderful to see, it was such a moving moment for me to see lesbians taking history back and asserting, their lesbian icons.
It's nice, isn't it, when you see a bit of the resistance happen in real life, not just on Twitter.
It was really cool too, because it was Dyke marches have a history of being politically charged marches, that they're there for a reason. It's not just to celebrate Pride. And this Dyke march was an anti-racist action, and the people at the front had a big banner that said "Dykes against racism everywhere." And we were led by women of color, and there was Caribbean street music, people with bottle and spoon, and these big metal drum things. It was really cool. So there was all kinds of noises and rhythms, and people chanting about racism, and people with signs against police brutality and stuff.
It
was really cool.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that it's I think it would be nice if some of the corporate stuff is I mean, it's not my community, so it's hard for me to say, but it really has gone out of control in the UK. Every police force, their badge is color of the rainbow.
Toronto has that.
Oh yeah, and our parade is just every bank, every major bank, every major media company. This is just corporation after corporation. It's just a corporate parade. It's literally just
to me, it's like advertising, but on the street with rainbows. That's what it is. Because most of them have no actual message or information or service. They're just oh, TD Bank, rainbows. Oh, BMO, rainbows. CIBC, rainbows. And some some muscly dudes in rainbow t-shirts dancing around. That's it. It's
oh God, what was I going to say? One police force this week felt it necessary to say that they stood behind asexuals.
Oh yeah.
It's how is that coming up in the day? How is that coming up in their day-to-day job?
And it's having a low sex drive isn't a axis of oppression. And
it's also not something you phone the police about.
Oh, right, exactly.
Unless they're those kind of police who arrive, pretend you're in trouble, and then take off all their clothes.
Oh, right, and then the sexy music starts.
So I was a bit annoyed there. You mentioned Twitter, because I don't know if you knew, but I've actually been banned from Twitter.
Welcome to the club, Graham.
Oh yeah, all the best people are banned, aren't they? Sorry, Artie. Now my favorite is GNC Centric. You used to be my favorite, but now it's GNC Centric.
Well, at least I can tweet about it. So sorry.
But it's been an interesting few days. I knew something was coming because every time I unlocked my account, made it not private, I got a flood of tweets that I was told to delete. and they all seem to have something. They all seem to have the word groom or grooming in them. Yeah, which Twitter has recently decided is not allowed.
So I just want to be clear, though. Twitter has recently decided that this word is no longer allowed.
Yes.
And have you been tweeting about it since that decision was made? And is this tweet from after that decision was made or before? Or the suspected tweet or whatever?
Well, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what happened. When I deleted these millions of tweets, because I just thought, oh, fuck this, I just want to go back to the account. So I deleted all these tweets knowing that Twitter takes deleting tweets as an admission of guilt. So, and then they say also during it that if this continues, if this behavior continues, then, we might have to take your account away. But then when I deleted all the tweets out of curiosity, I wrote a search thing for the word grooming or groomer in my Twitter history, and there were still loads of them. And I thought, well, I don't want to go through all of them and delete them. It's boring. And B, I still stand by the fact that, I think a lot of what's going on in this debate is grooming, And but the thing is that since the rule changed, I've not been using it, or I've been using it very carefully. I've been making sure that the word is appropriate to what's, like, I used to use it when basically kids would be writing and saying, okay, boomer. And we would just reply. Does that go off every time someone says, okay, boomer?
It's a boomer alert.
And we would just reply, okay, groomer, and really annoyed them. It really annoyed them because their most powerful meme, insult had been completely cut off at the knees. So however they did it, they got to Twitter, and Twitter banned it, But now it seems that it's being the word grooming or groomer anywhere in a thing is an automatic report.
That's crazy on multiple fronts. So if that is indeed the reason that you were banned, because I understand that Twitter's being a little bit cagey, they're not really being open about it. It's crazy on multiple fronts. One, that they can retroactively punish you. They announce a new rule and then punish you for having violated it in the past. That is fucking crazy.
I think Megan Murphy had a similar thing.
Yeah, and the other thing, two other things about that. The other one is that you can't talk about the word groomer. You can't accuse someone of grooming. That's a child safety issue. Grooming is something you need to discuss. And that's a strange coincidence that the man, oops, I said that word, who got Megan Murphy banned, is clearly a pedophile and was trying to groom children. So they sided with this literal groomer who was trying to harass Megan Murphy. And there was a retroactive punishment there too, because at the time that Megan Murphy referred to this person as him in a simple, innocuous tweet that just said, that's him, that's the guy, kind of thing. She didn't even say that's the guy. She just said that's him. When someone was asking who this person was. At the time, they were still using their male name, were they not?
Yes.
So it's like, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got a warning, and I was made to take something down for that too. And I was like, but they call themselves. And so it's just like Twitter is siding with explicit pedophiles, and Twitter is now making it easier for pedophiles to operate by banning the word groom, which is crazy. And they're retroactively punishing people for things that doesn't make any sense.
Well,
this is deliberate.
YouTube has a similar thing. Like, you guys know that To Catch a Predator guy?
Yeah.
I forgot his name. Whatever.
I don't know him personally.
He's been doing like deep dives into like YouTubers who are like groomers and exploiters, and like interviewing their victims on like YouTube streams.
Right.
And his video, I think this is correct. His videos where he uses the word predator or where the title has the word predator get demonetized.
Wow. Okay.
So like,
yeah.
So I guess I'm
just saying it's not unique to Twitter. I think a lot of social media companies are doing this kind of thing because they're trying to. I think they're scared. They don't know what people are discussing and how it will look to their advertisers. That's what I think it is.
So they're erring on the side of protect the advertisers instead of.
That's what I think it is.
Great job.
Yeah.
I also think it's tech bros looking out for other tech bros. I believe that the percentage of trans-identified males in Twitter is, huge. And not representative of the general population at all. So, you have this service that is basically the public square, You know, it's how people speak to each other and stay in touch with each other. And their operating system is completely opaque. We don't know how it works or what it's doing, or whether, like, for instance, the famous thing. And I spoke to the journalist Charles Arthur a few times about this, and he doesn't think there's a story. He thinks we're all being paranoid. But J.K. Rowling's tweets hitting a certain number, 207K for the Maya Forstater supportive tweet, 207K, and it just sticks there. It doesn't move. And people are constantly having to go back and re-like the tweet, and and then they go back a few days later and it's gone.
Yeah, that looks to me like there's somebody inside who's meddling, who's literally just trying to prevent.
It feels that way. It feels like it's like it's almost like they're saying, "Don't worry, there's only 207,000 bigots."
Yeah, they're trying to keep the number looking down. Yeah, I kept hearing about this. So there's that tweet where J.K. Rowling supported Maya Forstater, who had, affirmed that sex is real and been slapped down by a judge for it. And everybody was liking this tweet, and then everybody was reporting that their likes were disappearing. They would go back and look at the tweet, and it would see that they hadn't liked it. Their like had been removed. And at first I thought, well, this is probably some kind of browser cache issue or some technical glitch on the part of the users, until it happened to me. And now every time I check on that tweet, my like has been taken away. And there's another tweet that's happening too. And it's also a J.K. Rowling tweet on the subject of trans activism. So it's like two tweets that are by a famous person that are it's like there's some just snarky, cynical employees, I think, who are just going through the database and messing with it,
Yeah, absolutely. And like something we always point out, which is that it's still on the platform.
Yeah.
And
despite having 100,000 fake Twitter bot profiles.
It's not even that, though. It's like he's being investigated by the feds, the RCMP, because he's successfully groomed multiple teenage girls.
And you can't use that word anymore,
And you want him on your platform where there's lots of teenage girls? Like, it's really that simple, in my opinion.
Absolutely. It's
like,
shocking that they're
doesn't
still
he have a blue
standing by
check
the
mark?
Not.
If he has a blue check mark, then that means that they know he's actually literally like that person who's being investigated. That's what I mean, though. Like,
funny enough, I don't think he does.
Okay, well, never mind that. But I'm just saying, like,
but still, they can't play dumb.
Like, he's friends with people on Twitter. Have you seen those pictures?
Sorry, guys. I just have to tell my kids something. I won't be 1 sec. Sorry.
Sure. Remember, your microphone's still on.
No, but there's pictures of Yaniv with like a group of people, and like the people are the ones who work at Twitter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't remember specific examples, but we've seen this kind of thing in the past where somebody does something that could be offensive to trans people, and somehow they face consequences just for that. I mean, when somebody reports a tweet, there's just a person behind the computer looking at it, judging if this is a tweet that should or shouldn't be. So depending on who it is, they could decide. Like, that's what's so weird. There was somebody the other day, I don't remember what the tweet was, but they basically said like trans women are men or something, and the tweet was like, it was marked as like fine, as it's not verbally abusive or something. And then you have like other people who said, like, I said somebody was born male or something, and then I got kicked off. So like, it really depends who saw the.
Who happens to be wandering by the
market. Yeah, I think there's an ideological clique there for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think the connection between Silicon Valley and sort of pie in the sky imaginative sort of transhumanist thinking, and how that kind of ties into trans activism. I think one of the most wealthiest trans people, male to female trans people, is also a transhumanist. Isn't it the person who created?
Is that Pritzker?
No, it was a different one than Pritzker. I think it was the one who created Sirius XM radio or whatever, Sirius satellite radio.
Okay.
But they believe in like a magical singularity future, and transforming from a man to a woman is a way to transcend the limitations of the human body, kind of thing. So there's a futuristic ideal to all this too.
I wonder whether our the fact that we can now see each other as individuals in such a clear way because of the internet, that I wonder if people are just trying to. It feels sometimes like I've described it this way before, but it feels like they want us to become a kind of a soup, a soup of humanity that doesn't really have much differentiating it from the next person. You know,
well, if your entire company is all about big data chopping you into demographics, then maybe they see you that way, right?
Yeah. I also wonder what this intense categorization that kids are doing. Like I was making fun of it this week. I mean, I don't know. There could be other reasons I was banned. One of the things I did was I said in my bio that I was a woobly boobly sexual, and I said my definition, my pronouns were woobly stroke boobly. You know, and in my first draft of my statement about this, I apologized to, you know, woobly boobly people for appropriating their struggle and stuff like this, you know. So it could even have been that.
That's ridiculous. Like, you can't say that all pronouns are valid, and then, you know, if someone comes up with woobly boobly, well, all pronouns are valid. You're stuck with it. It's like the religious. Remember the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster was the idea that if all religions are valid, then I'm going to create a ridiculous religion, Pastafarianism, and you're just going to have to accept it, you know.
I was just thinking about that this week, the Flying Spaghetti Monster. That's exactly what it is. And you know, I'm sure we could get woobly boobly kind of accepted as a kind of sexuality. If
it should be in the drop down on Facebook.
It should be, yeah. When you're applying for a job with the police.
We should get all the Teletubbies in there. We should get Lala, Pose.
Oh, no, I don't think woobly boobly was a Teletubby. But
well, they are now.
It's a trick there. But the thing is, it is true that I remember another thing that happened once was Janice Turner of the Times said to Owen Jones something like, "Can I be non-binary? Am I non-binary?" or something like that. I'd like to be non-binary. And Owen Jones said, "No." No, you can't, because it's just for us young people. You know,
exactly.
You know what I mean? It's just it's such a joke. Although I have been thinking a little bit about something that Frankie Boyle said. Frankie Boyle said something like, his joke that got me annoyed was, he said something like a group of people who are so alienated that they feel that they've had to create you know, new categories for themselves to explain their suffering, something like that. And he said, the least I can do is remember a few pronouns, you know, remember, which is, with the first half of that sentence, I actually do agree with, because I think that the internet is kind of wreaking great damage on kids. I genuinely do. I think it's in various different ways. It's creating a mental health crisis, and I think we're seeing the results of that in a lot of the trans stuff that's going on, you know. So I do think that, you know, sympathy and compassion is required, and in fact it's why I love following detransitioners on Twitter and stuff, because for me they are the people who really are at the coal face of this stuff, and they know how to express that compassion and how to help, you know. But then he went on to ruin it by saying, you know, at least I could do is learn a few pronouns. I'm like, well, no, because, you know, one thing I wanted to say in the apology was is I know it's a little bit difficult to start saying, "Where's Graham? Woobly's outside." You know what I mean? But you'll get used to it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, you can't expect people. It's like they, them, you know?
And it just multiplies. It's too much to remember, especially when you have to do it for everybody. When everybody has their own. It's like when I was learning French, the hardest thing is that every single word has a gender. It's either like le or la. And I speak French fluently, except I never know which words are masculine and feminine. Because I can't attach. Yeah, and I can't attach the pronouns to every single freaking noun in the entire language. You're going to tell me I'm going to have to do that with people now too? I can't just look at a person and figure out what their pronoun is. I have to memorize this like personalized pronoun for the rest of my life for everybody. Fuck that. Yeah. You know.
There's an essay called "Pronouns Are Rohypnol" that is really good. I don't know if you read it. It's so good. But it is true that, you know, these things are. They say, "Oh, it's easy for you to do. You can just do it. Just do it. Why be so unkind?" It's like, well, it's not easy. And the comparison they use is one of those tests where they show you the color red, but they write the word blue over it.
Oh, like an implicit assumption kind of test, right?
And blue is in blue. The inside of blue is green or something, you know. And so you're looking at it and you're thinking, is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? And your brain is constantly, and it's destabilizing.
Oh, I get this. I have a trans friend.
It's destabilizing, you know,
and it's stressful. I have a friend who's like very visibly male, who's very, very sweet, and is kind of in distress and has dysphoria, and has decided, well, kind of keeps changing their minds, but has decided to go by, you know, feminine pronouns. But I keep screwing up because I'm overthinking it. And you know, it's that thing where I'm like, I'm looking at one thing, but it's labeled another thing. And I can't. And I really think this person's delightful and she's lovely, but it's just, I keep screwing up and I can't help it because she's so very, you know, she seems very male to me.
Well, the worst thing about it is that these people, sensitive people like your friend, are being convinced by trans rights activists that it is an act of violence for you to make those mistakes.
Well, she's very gracious about it, thankfully. But
you know what I mean?
I can see that it really hurts her too. Like it stings her and it triggers her dysphoria, and I just want to crawl into a hole.
But some people are very, very insistent on it, and they're very, very angry about it, and they are persuading these you know often you know, impressionable kids that people who don't do it are doing it for for reasons of, I don't know, hatred.
Yeah, but I think people are being trained though to be oversensitive about this thing. If you have dysphoria, you're supposed to be being taught resilience, and you're supposed to be being taught, you know, to understand your relationship with the world and your relationship to yourself, and to be to have confidence in yourself regardless of how other people are perceiving you. I think there's a word in psychology for that, like self something, you know, self whatever, and that seems to be like being discouraged, and you're almost encouraging people to be dependent on other people's validation.
Yes, that's the worst thing, because that will never happen. I mean, you can control a certain environment, like a small group you're in or something like that, but you just simply can't control I didn't even say okay boomer.
Right.
You can't control the wider world, you know, like the famous video of the person who was apparently an armed robber going into the GameStop and saying, it's ma'am. You know, I mean, this guy, he's twice the size of the shelves, you know, he's an armed robber. And he's not.
Oh, I don't think he was an armed robber though. He was just angry.
A customer.
He was just an angry customer.
No, he's an armed robber.
What?
Oh, you mean not in that video? Yeah.
Not in that video. He didn't
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, he's actually. I've seen the wanted posters and stuff.
That person, I mean, honestly, I don't think they're like much of a. I don't think they represent most trans people. Like on their YouTube channel, they're like doing meth with their kid. Like, I
know, yes. Yeah. He's a dangerous guy, but it just goes to show the dangers of like basically if you tell someone like that, who I don't even think is trans, is just again another criminal who's taking advantage of a completely incoherent system of thought, right? But if you tell someone like that it is legitimate to get extremely angry when someone misgenders you. And as I say, this guy he's like twice the size of everything in that shop, you know, and he's been given a kind of a loaded gun in the sense that he's been told he is within his rights to fucking freak out when someone says, sir, or do you know what I mean?
Well, that reminds me of the incident, that lovely woman and her husband you interviewed with the Speaker's Corner incident. These were just anarchist punks who were using, instead of music being the thing that defined their identity, these were just angry anarchist punks who were using the gender identity movement to sort of fuck with the system. And they were declaring, oh yeah, well, I'm really a woman, so that I can punch anyone in the face if they're not going to believe me.
Yes.
So it's a kind of an opportunity to express their misogyny, at the same time acting like they're sort of being anarchists and fucking things up, you know? It had nothing to do with genuine dysphoria or, you know, trying to, you know, incorporate oneself in society and just, you know, to fit in or to just, you know, live one's happy self, true self. These are just punks who are using the whole ideology to abuse people.
Yeah,
you know.
The thing that always kills me about that video is the guy with the ponytail. There's a guy with a ponytail, and he's neither trans nor pretending to be trans. He is just a bloke, a really big bloke. And one of the women tries to calm him down. One of the women on his side tries to calm him down, and he spins on her. And you can see he's saying, like, get the fuck away from me, you know? And so you realize, oh, this is a guy who's in this group now and he realizes he's now allowed to attack women. He's now allowed to attack women, you know? And when another woman pulls him up on it, even though she's on the same side, he kind of forgets himself and he expresses the same misogynistic hostility at her as well, you know? And so like, it's one of the things we keep saying to people. It's like we're not against trans people. We're trying to make trans activism and trans activism really less aggressively misogynistic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem I think is the word trans can be anything. People imagine one thing, but trans is just anybody who declares that they want, to be perceived as the opposite sex for any reason. And there are myriad reasons. This reminds me of something. About 20 years ago, I used to work for a French company, well, a Swiss company, but we spoke French, and all my coworkers were Parisian, and we just spoke French all day long, and half of them were gay. And they started referring to each other as pédé. And I've never heard this term before. It's like pédé. In the French language 20 years ago, the word, like the slang term for homosexual, the equivalent of gay in French was pédé, which means pederast. And in the language, there's no distinction between a pedophile and homosexual. It's the same word.
There's a lot of languages that have the same thing.
And it's the same concept. So imagine being a gay rights advocate, but the word for gay was the same as pedophile. How do you separate out the bad pédés, the ones who are having non-consensual sex with minors who can't consent, with the good pédés who are just consenting adults of the same sex, when the concept has been completely merged? And I see that with trans. Like, the word is like, there are some very genuine, very sympathetic people who, are adopting the social role of the opposite sex for very compassionate reasons, very, very sympathetic reasons. And then there are other people who are doing it for very non-sympathetic reasons, who are, predators and groomers and dangerous people. But the word encompasses both of these groups. Yeah. And that's dangerous,
That's a distinction that we're going blue in the face trying to get across to people.
Yeah.
And every time you try and make that distinction, rather than making the distinction, they actually broaden it out onto those people, onto the sympathetic people, because you will point out someone like Yaniv or Karen White or something, and we hear it all the time. You're saying that all trans people are predators. It's like,
it's a problem of language. We really need better language to be able to speak much more specifically about who we're talking about when we're talking about these people.
We've been trying to do that for years. Like, I remember in, like, what year is it right now? 2014 or whatever. Like, on Tumblr and Twitter, a bunch of us were trying to, like, figure out, like, who can we look at and categorize as not really trans? Because we were seeing more and more transgenders, right? And like, so that's like a different angle, but we were thinking, like, how can you know who is and isn't trans? And at the end of the day, we were told basically by everyone, like, there's two camps. There's a camp of you need to have dysphoria, but how can you tell by looking at someone? And the camp of you can't police other people's identities. And that's kind of where things have stayed. Right. And because of that, and because of, like, the queer community is so obsessed with validating everyone, they would never give the parameters for this person doesn't count or this person shouldn't be accepted into our community. So, like, at the end of the, like, I used to think for a couple years that, like, okay, there's like bad people who are using the trans label, using the trans laws to get away with bad things, but, like, those are the minority and the exception, and we need to find a way to just like comb them out, right? But then I realized, like, if legally and socially there's no distinction, there's no way to comb them out. It's an all or nothing at this point. Like, I think that's how the LGB drop the T kind of happened. There's no way to distinguish that, like, oh, this person who's had dysphoria since they were a child, who went through years of therapy, who finally decided this is what's right for them, who's like in the right mental health space to be able to do this. There's no distinction between that person transitioning and like a literal man putting on a wig and walking into a store and being like, my pronouns are she, her. There's no distinction. So it's an all or nothing at this point, I think.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, so there's two things we have to figure out. Like, there's no distinction between somebody who's got genuine distress and is doing this to help themselves, but even a lot of these people who have genuine distress and who are doing it to relieve their distress, even I wouldn't necessarily qualify as like the same as women. There's still problems with that group. I think, to qualify as a woman or to be accepted more into womanhood, and the degree to which you're accepted into womanhood is a decision that is women's to make and not men's.
Yes.
And
it has to be unanimous. that's the big problem with it. It has to be unanimous. As long as there's one woman who says, actually, I'm not comfortable with that, then I'm sorry, you can't do it. You just can't do it,
But that's what I mean. Like, it's an all or nothing. Either you accept all trans people into the washroom or no trans people. There can't be like, oh, well, the ones who pass. Like, who's the judge of that?
Well, I mean, it would be, who should be the judge of that is some kind of, transition should be gate kept. And it should be gate kept under the terms of helping yourself and under the terms of understanding women's rights and feminism. It's like when you apply for Canadian citizenship, you have to learn Canadian history and you have to understand, like, maybe if you're like, why isn't there, it's all about looking feminine transition. It's not about understanding womanhood. Shouldn't there be part of the process of becoming a woman is like learning about feminism, learning about
or liking them? I mean, there's a few people who you can just tell just loathe women, just absolutely despise.
They'll say it outright.
Yeah. I mean, and they're the people who people accuse me of misgendering. I am very careful about misgendering. I certainly don't do it on Twitter when I can, but by deliberately. I once did it by mistake. So I'll tell you how I did it. I was talking to someone whose son had transitioned, and we had a very nice conversation. And at the end of it, and I said, well, I hope he's happy now, by mistake, and people leapt on that as me abusing this kid, But what was I going to say with my point? But the thing is. I know. I have a trans friend in Norwich who was like me, sued by Stephanie Hayden, and she announced on Twitter. I use her pronouns, but she announced on Twitter that although she and her partner had always thought of themselves as being in a lesbian relationship, she said she wasn't going to use that to describe herself anymore because she felt it was disrespectful to lesbians and disrespectful to women. There were two things about this that I thought. First thing was how wonderfully woman-like of her to do that. How wonderfully compassionate and understanding and sisterly of that person to do that and to say it out loud. And my second thought was, what a shame she had to do it because she wouldn't have to do it in a world where we're not all connected online, because she would just be in her little lovely bubble with her girlfriend, and she wouldn't have to deal with it. But because of these hardliners insisting on all these, that everyone who says they're a woman is actually literally a woman, then she actually to distance herself from these hardliners has to do something that's, taking a little bit of joy out of her life, And I think it's a really good example of why these activists are just so harmful, not just to people like us who disagree with them, but to people on their side, or people who are supposed to, the people who they're purporting.
I could talk for hours about how they're actually fucking over most trans people. Like, first of all, they're trying to make it an identity and not a medical condition. Do you know what that means? No medical insurance. Is that what you want for trans people? Like, how dumb is that? Another thing is that they've been watering down the definition of dysphoria, like in policy in hospitals and gender clinics, because of trans activism. And or like following W Path, which is like basically a TRA run organization, and they've been watering down gatekeeping over the last like many years, like 10 years or something. And as a result, more and more people who may not be like bettered by transition are transitioning and then detransitioning. Like more and more people are transitioning with like very little to no support. I know so many people who went to like once to an informed consent clinic, got their hormones with no therapy before, and never saw a doctor again or a therapist again. Like this is not the way trans people need to be supported. Like they're really hurting a lot of people. They're also teaching in schools that like, oh, if you feel like you're a Barbie, that means you're like a girl, and if you feel like you're a G.I. Joe, you're a boy. Like how are they teaching this to little tiny kids who might just be like gender nonconforming or who might be gay, or even if they are trans, like teaching them at such a young age that they're in the wrong body cannot be helpful to their mental health.
No.
Like
it's abuse.
So much of what they're doing is not helpful. It's all about like worshiping identity. But is that helpful to somebody with a mental health condition?
No.
Or like increasing sensitivity to pronouns or increasing sensitivity to misgendering to the point where somebody will have a full-on breakdown when somebody misgenders them because they've been told by everybody trans that they're friends with that they definitely 100% pass, and then they walk out into the world and they don't actually pass, and they have to deal with the incongruence of this. Like they're really fucking people over. People like when I started becoming friends with FTMs in like 2008 or 9, like they were not the kind of people who are like ranting about pronouns all day. They're not the kind of people who go outside and if somebody misgenders them, it ruins their entire week. Because they weren't expecting to be treated. They understood the reality of their position in the world. Now you're teaching all these people that no, your position in the world is what you want it to be, and if people don't see that, they're evil. Then of course you walk out into the world and you're not prepared for the reality of it. Like they're really hurting people who are dysphoric or who are trans-identified, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and also I think that a lot of the people who are the most violent activists are, you know, straight men. You know, they're straight men, and I think they see. I don't even know if a lot of them are doing it unconsciously, but a lot of them are. I think a lot of them are doing it knowing how much of a knife it's sticking in women's rights. You know, but a lot of, you know, it's basically undermining women in so many different areas, you know, and I don't see the same numbers of trans people doing it. I don't see them, you know. I get the occasional trans person coming up to me directly and being rude, but generally it's bearded men. Bearded men are the number one kind of group I get in my mentions, you know, complaining about me, you know.
Yeah. The other one too is like young men who are like love anime porn a little too much or something, you know. The anime,
I think it's sure sign.
Teenage girl icon people.
Every time I see someone with a choker, a bloke with a choker, I think too much porn.
Yeah.
No more porn for you.
No, but it's been that way for a long time. Like I remember when I first got on Twitter in 2009, I think. Yeah. And 2009. And when I started like following a bunch of trans people, all of them, like a lot of the recommended follows were like basically like straight male allies. And you would see like these bigger name people, which I don't remember all the names, but I just remember seeing like these trans women who had like a couple thousand followers who like their stuff would get retweeted a lot. The primary group of people that they communicated with, other than other trans women, was these like straight woke bros.
Yeah.
And when they would get into like an interaction with somebody who would like question something about trans ideology or who would question something about identity politics or something, like the standard reaction was all the woke bros would attack this person so that the trans person wouldn't have to like make it their problem. That was like their like allyship. Yeah. So
I've seen
like
that.
I became friends with a lot of these like woke bro types, and a lot of them also are in my experience, like groomers themselves, and they recognize that in the trans community, that kind of stuff is not questioned. So, like a lot of them, they'll say that they're bi or pan when they're literally just straight, so that they can start like sexual texting or like sexual messaging or video chatting with trans men, because then they're like, oh well, I'm bi, so I'm validating your identity, and then they are like talking to a bunch of teenage trans men.
Right. Yeah,
Like that's just my experience with them. Like I think that there's
it's grooming. That's
grooming.
if
Is
there's
that
like
word?
a woke bro who's like in the trans community, it's for a reason. Either he hates women and he now has an excuse to yell at them online, or he's trying to get into a community that is like enables predators, or like there's a reason basically. It's not just out of the goodness of their heart, I don't think.
I do think there's a third group, which is just like, you know, as we both know, there's bizarrely a lot of young women who are going along with this stuff as well, and I think it's a mating dance. I think it's like you know, calling someone a turf or something like that it's you know, it's just making sure they're the girls who are watching kind of, you know.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, but you're right. It's completely selfish. It's got no. Like if they weren't selfish, if they weren't doing it for selfish reasons, they wouldn't do it, because they would know what you just said about how they're potentially affecting the mental health of these people by re-emphasizing this idea that you know, misgendering them is violence, or people arguing for women's rights despise them. I mean, I'll never forget the Megan Murphy doing that speech at the library, and people shouting in their faces, you know, these young men just shouting in women's faces that they're scum and shame and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, Megan Murphy, she wrote a great essay the other day. She published it at Feminist Current about the Karen meme, and how it's just, you know, for a few weeks ago, people were joking that it's just a word, and, you know, feminists should lighten up, and it's not necessarily misogynistic. But I'm starting to see that it really is. You know, Karen, people are just so eager to call other women Karens, and the definition of a Karen keeps shifting. And it started out with a guy who was like resented his ex-wife, who was Karen, and he was trying to make her into a meme to punish her because he was a misogynist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And now it's become, you know, and then it was like a woman who like complains to the manager, and then it became a white woman who like oppresses black people. That was tacked on much later. But I think the eagerness and the zeal with which men and women have latched onto Karen shows an underlying hatred of women and just looking for an excuse. Like, and it's just like TERF. I think TERF, people are so eager to have an excuse to attack women. And, you know, the kind of men, beardy bros who throw the word TERF around, these are the same kind of men who are just can't wait to call a woman a Karen, you know? Yeah.
Well, did you see the video of the guy in the woman's driveway shooting her her thing? Now, that was a perfect example. That was just basically...
Well, that person is not... Do you know who that person is?
Oh, no, I don't.
He like monetizes this kind of thing. It's like,
oh, the man does.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to tell me
he's
the
not
woman
like
is.
I don't think he's just like a normal guy walking down the street. I think he was like looking for this to happen.
He had already printed merchandise and T-shirts to sell.
No,
yeah,
and then he was going after women and accusing them of things to get them online, to get them on camera.
Yeah. But that's a really good example of how successful the campaign, this kind of social engineering campaign, has been to make women look like they are actually not oppressed by men, but are actually, some of them are the oppressors, are above men.
Parents and TERFs are both women who are, you know, oppressors. It's exactly right. You know, the idea that these people they need to get in place. They need to know their fucking place down. You know,
I think that though what's happened, like especially in like since June when all the Black Lives Matter protests started, is that people do want to be able to like criticize, like I don't know, like
white power.
Yeah, white power. I wasn't sure how to...
White female power, maybe.
Yeah, like white power, yeah. So I'm not saying... Like, of course, white women can be racist. They're racist, of course. But now that it's tied to a women suck, it's not just critical of, like, race, like, reactions to race. It's like, these women suck, and that's kind of where the ball... Like, that's where people take the ball and run with it. So, like... I think that obviously, like, it's important to be able to, like, criticize, like, yes, white women, despite being, like, women under patriarchy, can, of course, be racist and perpetuate racism. Instead of it just being that, though, it's like, these women are bitches, basically. Like it's become kind of like the new bitch at this point.
Yeah.
Like I think we should be able to like be nuanced and critical about racism without being like completely misogynistic. They don't have to be one and like go hand in hand.
Well, you know, like the thing, obviously, when some woman is phoning the police on a black family in a park, that's one thing. I still don't really like the kind of the fact that it's now a culture of shaming. I think that's really dangerous. And yet that, you know, you could certainly justify reporting that person. But this woman in this video, it seemed to me that she'd flipped him off. This is a white guy, and she'd flipped him off. That's not something you ruin someone's life for. They just skipped the part where the person did something bad, and they went straight to the shaming, and no one seemed to notice. Well, no, people noticed, but you know, feminists noticed, and you know, people like Jesse Singal noticed, but it went viral, didn't it? And it was a big thing. But there was no, but there was nothing there. There was nothing to be. What was the thing? What was the? So it's now just pure anger, pure hatred, pure misogyny. You know, and it's kind of being endorsed by you know, the very people who I used to trust to fight it. You know, I mean, the left's abandonment of women to me it's so destabilizing for me. It's
a Black Mirror episode come to life. Somebody call what's his name, that guy who created
Charlie Brooker. Yeah,
Charlie Brooker. You should pitch him. You can write a Black Mirror about this.
Well, I love Charlie. He's a great guy, but he's another person who is very conspicuously quiet about all this, and I really wish he'd speak up. You know, because you know, we need as many voices as possible, and the fewer voices there are, the more isolated and punished the individuals who do speak up are.
I know, and it's like more. It's really scary. You know, I'm using an alias, obviously, but I've got my face out there, so I'm half up the parapet. You know?
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. You're very wise. I mean, I may use my time machine to go back and do some of that.
Well, also something else is that you can talk to people in real life one-on-one about the issues without like being a turf and without like publicly online talking about, like, I don't mean celebrities, I mean like, you know, normal people. Like you can affect change in some ways without like putting yourself at risk. Like I do think that like things have gotten to the point where like Magdalene Burns said, like you need to just like buck up and show people that you don't believe this anymore, because people, like, as long as people are silent about it, they'll assume that things are fine. But you don't have to publicly be online. Yourself as a turf to get something done. You can also like go to school board meetings, talk to your city council people. Like there's things you can do.
Yes.
Or to let that. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't think this is going to be one online. I think it's definitely going to happen offline. I think one thing we might make a mistake about is looking at Twitter and thinking it reflects the general mood. But I think the thing about Twitter is that 90% of people in real life agree with J.K. Rowling, and those figures are reversed on Twitter. Yeah. You know, so you know, I think you're right. Real life is the place to do it. And one thing I said to people is, and I really hope people do this, is whenever anyone uses the word cis. You may not agree with this, Benji, but I can you imagine how long it would last because I had someone writing to me this week, and they said they are actually worried that the word cis is going to become embedded in the language, you know. And I said, well, anytime anyone says it, I said it won't survive real life conversations because you know, a lot of people are going to go, I'm sorry, I find that word offensive. Please do not call me cis. Please do not call me a cis woman. You know. And I think that it won't survive that. It won't survive that. I mean, I understand that it's a useful word in certain situations, but as a wider world that exists outside of academia and queer theory and stuff like this, I just don't think it's going to catch on, you know. And still people are going, what does that mean? Every time it's said, you know. And then when they hear the explanation, they go, what?
Like also when you're in normal conversation with someone, it's like it's not unusual for somebody to say like a trans woman and a woman, and you know that they mean the woman is cis. Like,
yes, exactly.
In normal
exactly.
conversation, most people don't say it, I think, unless
Yes,
you're like in the queer community. Yeah.
It's a word that exists for a problem that doesn't exist. You know, like the word exists, and the only reason the word exists is because these idiots pushed all their chips in on trans women or women as a phrase. They said, no, I'm betting all my money, trans women or women, it's that or nothing, you know? And now everyone's saying, well, no. And they've already pushed all their chips in, so it's too late to take it back. So they have to defend their position as savagely as they can, you know? And one of those ways is by saying, you know, insisting on the word cis, but people won't take it. It won't survive face-to-face conversations. There's a woman over here, her name is Julia, I always forget, because she's one of those triple barreled names, so it's always hard to forget. Julia Hartley Brewer, I think her name is, you know. And she and I would probably disagree on 99% of things. She is very right-wing, a right-wing kind of shock jock over here, you could say, you know. But like a lot of right-wingers, she's very polite. A lot of British right-wingers, she's very polite. She's very... She's very she argues her points really well, but one person tried to use the word cis woman in her studio, and she gave them both barrels, you know.
Yeah.
And really kind of, you know, it's one of those things that, yeah, you'll be able to say that to certain people, but if you say that to the wrong person, you're really gonna get a rough time, you know.
Yeah.
I don't mean violently. Just someone's gonna really be angry at you, you know,
or at least ask you questions you can't answer.
Exactly.
Like I also was last night. I kind of went down a rabbit hole on YouTube, and I ended up on some like looking at some like conservative media, and there was this one woman, you know, the typical kind of conservative woman pundit, like blonde and happy looking, and
yeah.
She was talking to people at some kind of a trans like rally or something, or protest, and she was trying to ask them like to explain their position on things, and they kept saying like, well, you don't know because you're a cis woman, and she kept saying like, I'm not a cis woman, and they were like, oh, so you're non-binary or something, and she was like, no, like
it's so funny. It's like they keep saying language changes all the time, not by force, you know. You can't just say, oh, we're going to call some minority rats now, and you have to say that. You can't say I'm this minority, I'm a rat. No one's going to accept it.
And to impose it on other people. They're imposed. It's not even defining themselves. Yeah. Women aren't defining themselves as cis. Men are defining women as cis.
Yes, exactly. It's just. But listen, this is not the most natural of endings. But I'm going to have to wrap it up in a sec. Okay. But that was a really good one, I think. We didn't really
Can
have.
I just say one tiny thing about cis? I also think that cis and trans is like a false dichotomy, because there are a lot of people with dysphoria who don't transition, and there are a lot of detransitioners who legally are cis who they don't have a cis experience of life. Like it's way too simplistic. Nothing is that black and white when it comes to like personality and identity and stuff. Yeah.
Well, the weird thing about it is that they don't seem to understand that if you use the version of reality that we've all agreed on for about, you know, however many thousands of years, if you agree with that, then it will actually it won't impose gender roles on you. It will allow you to escape those gender roles. But what they're doing is they're putting people into smaller and smaller boxes and categories. You know, I saw someone who said recently, my labels are important to me. I thought, what? Why do you need to label and categorize yourself? You know, and it's simply, you know, it's like the Jets and the Bloods, or you know what I mean? The Sharks, the Sharks. You know, it's like gang membership, and it's all stuff that when you put it before the internet, it was really harmless and fun, and it allowed people to express themselves in a myriad of different ways. But now it's been kind of poisoned and weaponized and politicized and radicalized. And it's a real shame because a lot of these kids are just doing things that, you know, they're just they're just having fun, you know. And it's just a shame that it's being turning into this terrible thing. But I really am going to have to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Artie and Benji. It's been a lot of fun, and let's do it again next week. I think we were going to do a theme of Strange Bedfellows about the right and the right's relationship to this situation. So let's do that next week, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Goodbye, guys. See you soon.
Bye.